Hello and welcome. You're watching Sunday Politics live on Channels Television. I'm Kayode Okikelu here in Lagos. Well, the New Year holiday is almost over and it's back to work tomorrow. Now, I don't mean to ruin the moment for you. In fact, I'm here to make the most of this moment for the next half hour, or in fact, 1 hour to be precise. Now, to be fair, you're not the only one faced with work. In fact, when you look at the magnitude of work before the government, I'm talking getting the nation out of recession, engaging the booming youth population, reducing unemployment and inflation, improving the exchange rate, raising millions of Nigerians out of poverty, keeping Nigerians safe from kidnapping, banditry, terrorism and all, combating the second wave of COVID-19, and not to forget vaccines. I can go on and on. So looking at all that, which you have right there on your screen, and comparing it with maybe your workload, then maybe you might get some consolation. But the thing about your work is, if you don't deliver on your job, there are consequences. Is it the same for government? And what should be the consequences when government does not meet the expectations of its employers, that is, you and I? Well, tonight on the program, we preview the work ahead of government in this new year, using the president's speech and Nigerians' expectations as a guide or some sort of yardstick. And then we consider the consequences, maybe, for not meeting them. In fact, the president himself alluded to the work ahead in his New Year speech, and this is what he says. He says, the new year, 2021, will indeed be a year where we will work to reinforce the hopes of fellow Nigerians in the vision of a united and progressive Nigeria. So there again, you see the president using the term work. But that's not all he said. Take a listen to some more, especially in the area of security.
Some of the key priority areas we will direct our attention and strength to include re-energizing and reorganizing the security apparatus and personnel of the armed forces and the police with a view to enhance their capacity to engage, push back, and dismantle the operations of both internal and external extremists and criminal groups waging war against our communities in some parts of the country. It proves that Nigeria has the internal capacity to decisively deal with terror attacks on our citizens. However, we recognize that we rapidly have to move to a more proactive and preemptive posture to ensure that these sorts of traumatic incidents do not become a norm. Our administration is fully aware of the responsibility we have to protect the lives and property of all Nigerians, and we will not relent in learning and adapting to changing threats to our national security and civic well-being.
Well, the president's New Year address is in fact longer than that, over 15 minutes. And in some sense, it gives us a picture of the government's plan for 2021. But let's break it down for you even further and maybe clear some gray areas. And joining us on the program tonight to do just that is Mr. Femi Adesina, Special Advisor on Media and Publicity to the President. Good evening, and thank you for joining us on the program.
Good evening.
May I say Happy New Year?
Thank you. Thank you.
Seeing what, the president's speech is sort of different from what we saw last year. I mean, last year it was a letter to Nigerians. Oh, yeah. This time it was a president speaking. So as a starting point, really, why the change of style? Because you have talked about the president's style. So why the change of style this year?
Well, both are communicating. A letter communicated with Nigerians. This broadcast also is a means of communication. You will notice that a broadcast on New Year Day is not a norm. If you look back, a broadcast on New Year's Day does not come every year. It was just felt that 2020 being such a challenging year and a new, can I say an era? Well, because it's just a continuum, okay? But we know in terms of calendar, it's like a new era coming in 2021. So it's an opportunity to look back and look forward. and rekindle hope. So we just felt a broadcast will be sufficient for January 1.
Because a lot of people last year said they wanted to see the president speak. Time and again, they kept saying, we want to see the president address the nation. So it would seem the president actually listened in some sense.
The president will always listen because he was elected by the people. But then, talking of hearing him speak, he speaks. He speaks. During the COVID-19 lockdown, I think there were about 3 or 4 broadcasts within 3-4 months. He was speaking. He was speaking. But then you will still hear some people saying, let him speak to us, let him speak to us. And then I'll ask them, those broadcasts, who was he speaking to? The president speaks.
So seeing that the president, started the year on this note, will we be seeing such, maybe more media engagements, interviews with the president in this new year?
I am not promising interviews. Interviews, as in sit down and let him talk. It's his prerogative to do that. If he wants to do that, we'll be happy. But then, nothing is lost, even if he does not do it, because everything he wants to say will be communicated one way or the other.
But don't you think it takes some things away when you don't see the president have those interviews?
It takes us back to style again. If his style is, you say this, you are my spokesman, you say this, you are Minister for Information, you say this, you are Minister for Youth and Sports, talk to the youth.
And then maybe I say some things and have an interaction with the media.
Yes.
Maybe.
Oh, yes, maybe. Why not? Why not? It could happen.
Okay.
Nothing is foreclosed.
Well, we'll hold you to that because it's a whole year.
You won't hold me because I didn't promise, but I say it's not foreclosed.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at the content because it's a lot. He talked about not just security, which we listened to. He talked about the economy. He talked about the anti-corruption fight, which is sort of the SEA agenda of this government. But before we get into that, I began by saying that for people who are employed, if they don't perform or if they don't meet up to expectations, there are consequences. You either get a query, you get a suspension. In fact, sometimes some people are dismissed as a result of that. So looking at the president's speech, at the end of the year, we look at the promises in some sense and we see that some of them were not met, will there be consequences?
Yeah, in a political situation where you have term, as in 4 years, the consequences will usually be loss of reputation, loss of respect for that government, and eventually it could reflect at the polls. But we know that this is a government that has reputation, that has integrity, and what has been promised will be accomplished. And at the end of the term, when the elections are held, we will see the result again.
Well, that's 4 years. But, in those 4 years, we have 1 year. In fact, we have months and days in between. And reflecting briefly on the president's letter last year, he talked about security. In fact, he said that there will be no hiding place for those who want to terrorize the country. And that was some sort of promise, saying that in this year, we'll ensure we nip this issue of security in the bud. Would you say there were consequences for that, the insecurity we saw last year?
You know that 2020 will not be the real benchmark year for most of these things, because a lot of the things promised in that letter could not also be actualized to the letter, because from March, the country, indeed the world, was like on suspended animation. There were lockdowns everywhere, and it lasted till like the last quarter of the year. So 2020 will not be a good benchmark. But it's to the advantage of this government that most of the things promised may not have been accomplished 100%, but a good number of them were accomplished, despite low earnings, despite economy not functioning at full throttle. A good number of them were still accomplished.
I was speaking specifically about security.
Security.
Yes. Were there consequences for the insecurity we saw last year, maybe in terms of operations, the people that were told to handle this, and it didn't seem those things were handled? Were there consequences? Because that's how we'll judge what to expect in 2021.
No, if you recall a part of that broadcast, the president said he knows that Nigerians want a lot more, particularly in the area of security, but that they should not forget what the government met on ground when it came. He was talking of security. And what did the government meet? 17 local governments under occupation, full occupation by Boko Haram. Emirs had fled their palaces, roads had been locked, NYSC orientation camps were now holding in many states of the country. But look at the situation of things today. It's a lot better. We may not have got to where we are going, but it's a lot better.
Well, so the situation of security, according to the Sultan of Sokoto, you may have heard that statement. He said that security situation in northern Nigeria has assumed a worrisome situation. People think north is safe, but that assumption is not true. In fact, it is the worst place to be in this country because bandits go around the villages, households, and markets with their AK-47, and nobody is challenging them. In fact, he referred to a burial which he went for. Over 70 people were killed. So that's not 2015, that's 2020. So that clearly is a failure in terms of security. So were there consequences for that?
No, no. You're using that failure, you are using it too broadly. You're using it too broadly. You don't take 1, 2, 3 events and then you conclude that it's all failure. You get to some other parts of the north and they will tell you that things are a lot better. Even Governor Zulum, who is in Borno State, which is like the epicenter of the insurgency, will tell you that the situation in that state is far better than what it was in 2015. Yes.
A lot of issues to raise, really. We'll probably still touch on these things, but part of the president's, speech, broadcast, he spoke about youths. And, I mean, we saw what happened last year with the EndSARS protests. A lot of young Nigerians coming out to say, we want things done better, not just for the police. In fact, it was for a lot of things, the political system. And take a look at what the president says. Says, as a government, we're committed to actively engaging with the creative energies of our young people. In this regard, we will partner with the legislature to develop an enabling environment to turn their passions into ideas that can be supported, groomed, and scaled across the region. So the question will be, what is the president thinking specifically in this area? Because this is not quite clear. A lot of young people are looking to know what to expect. So what is the specifics of this?
Well, there were demands under 5 broad umbrellas. They were later expanded. Some are immediate. The ones that are immediate have been tackled. We don't want SARS. SARS was disbanded. We want this. If it's medium term, it's being worked on. If it's long term, it will come. So we need to know what can be done immediately and what is medium term and what is long term. And if you listen to the Minister of Sports and Youth Development, he already outlined so many things that are being done and will still be done for Nigerian youths. So
I still say specifically, because a lot of Nigerians are watching, young Nigerians specifically.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of them are probably processing to travel abroad, but maybe this might just help in helping them see that, okay, maybe I could stay back and see what this country holds for me. So in specific terms, again, what is in store for young people in this area?
A lot. For instance, sometime, I think it was in November, you had the Young Farmer Scheme that Mr. President launched himself under NALDA, National Agricultural Development Authority. It's an opportunity for youths. Youths are going to be empowered. They will be helped to go into different kinds of agricultural projects, aquaculture, crop farming, animal husbandry, and all that. And when those things mature, they will be bought of them so that their money can be replowed into that business again. That's one great opportunity for youths. And there are many others, many others. In fact, we came out with a statement sometime in December, early December, of what the Buhari government is doing specifically for Nigerian youths. It's a whole basket.
And do you think the majority of Nigerian youths buy into this?
It's for them. It's for them. It is there. They need, if they want to change, they've got to buy into it.
Because some of them will say, well, I'm not interested in agriculture.
So then...
I mean, it's their choice.
Yes,
some of them
it's their
say,
choice.
well, this is not my area. I can't force myself into this.
I agree with that. It's their choice. That is why it's not limited to agriculture alone. you have in the area of IT, you have in diverse areas. It's a whole basket. It's just a matter of referring to that statement we issued, chronicling everything that has been done to support the youth.
Still, this maybe ties to that promise that the president made to lift 100 million people out of poverty in 10 years, in some sense. So, at an average, that's about 10 million per year,
yes.
I mean, by simple math. So, from that period to this point, how many Nigerians, millions, thousands, have been lifted out of poverty in line with that promise?
Well, there is a Minister for Labor and Employment, Dr. Chris Ngige. He will have those facts at his fingertips. But remember that last year really slowed down a lot of things, not just in Nigeria, but globally. 2020 slowed down a lot of things. But that is not an excuse for not meeting that target. The target that was not met in 2020 could be met in 2021, in that you have to work harder, perform harder than your projection, so that you can make up for the previous year.
Because the truth is this, clearly there's that deficit, millions of Nigerians in poverty. And would you say, you said that the government did not meet that target for last year?
I said may not have, and we know.
Because we know the ministers briefed the president.
We know why. We know why they wouldn't have made it. Because income dwindled to 40% of what we used to earn. So that is one reason to even know that you won't meet all the targets.
Okay. Well, there are some other targets, in quote, that this government met in terms of budgeting, for example. I mean, when the president was speaking about the budget, he said as of December, they had released about 1.74 trillion naira, which is about 89%. In fact, he talked about the performance of the capital part, which is about 97%. So the government met that target. So how is it hard to meet the target of raising 10 million Nigerians out of poverty in a year?
You know, there are some things that respond to policies. Raising people out of poverty will respond to policies and programs and plans. When you are able to execute your policies and your projects and plans, that is when it redounds to the issue of raising people out of poverty.
I said we were going to talk about security again, which the president largely spoke about. And on security, the president said Nigeria has the internal capacity to decisively deal with terror attacks on our citizens. However, we recognize that we rapidly have to move to a more proactive and preemptive posture.
Yes.
That's, so some people might sound vague. What is proactive? What is preemptive? So what does that mean on the streets when you say security agents?
That part you quoted, you need to look at what led to it. He was talking of the Kankara schoolboys, their abduction and the collaboration of the security agencies and how eventually they were retrieved. That was why he said it's good to have retrieved them, but it's better to have preempted such things from happening. So that is...
So this new year, the government is going to be preventing the attacks rather than dealing with the aftermath?
By the grace of God. At the end of it all, it's God that helps a human being to achieve anything. But no government will be happy to see schoolboys abducted. None.
Let me touch on the economy, because, I mean, it's part of the SEA, and the president, speaking on the economy, talked about revamping the economy through the National Economic Diversification Agenda, supports, primary goal of national food self-sufficiency, and he talked about this helping reduce the growing food-related inflationary figures. But when you look at the food index, Mr. Adesina, you see that, by the way, the food index accounts for about, more than half the inflation basket. You see it has risen to 17.4% compared to what it was previous month, which was 16%. And some say this will keep rising. So judging from what we have seen, how can we trust that this government will deliver this in the new year?
Now, if we throttle back a bit, 2015, 2016, you will see that inflation rate was around that 16, 17%. It was even almost getting to 20%. And then things began to improve, and it got to about 11-point-something%. That shows you that it was going into single digit. And then the reversal came, not unconnected with the global situation and the Nigerian situation, and things began to decline. So when we look at the decline, we should remember that there was a time it was going into single digit. the same government that accomplished that is still the government. So, government will still rally back and things will get better.
I mean, not the same government that saw inflation rise up to 17.4%.
Yes, but then that inflation got to 11 point something percent at a point.
Mr. Adesina, quite a number of issues to raise, really, but
no,
I've run out of time.
I want you to internalize that.
I understand. I think we'll spend the next couple of days internalizing, but we'd like to thank you so much, Mr. Femi Adesina, Special Advisor on Media and Publicity to the President. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us on the program. I wish you the very best this year.
Thank you, and you too. Thank you.
Well, let's take a break now, and up next, we take a look, in fact, bring you more analysis of the President's speech, but this time from the opposition. Join us again. Welcome back to the program. We're still taking a look at this government's plan for 2021 as contained in the President's New Year message. Quite a number of issues to raise, really. But this time, let's speak with another party involved in this. And I'm talking about the People's Democratic Party. And we have joining us on the program Mr. Anthony Ehelebo, head of new media of the PDP. Good evening and thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much, Kayode. A happy New Year to Nigerians.
Oh, yes, and a happy New Year to you. Now, right after the President's New Year message, your party came out with its own statement saying that the President's speech, his message was empty and directionless. And the question will be, what did you expect to hear from that message that was missing?
Well, quite frankly, I was awake from 4 a.m. and somehow my body clock tricked me at 6:59 to fall asleep, knowing that there would be nothing in that speech. And I think my body was right, because at the time I woke up by 7:45 and I read the speech, I was very happy that I fell asleep at that time, because it's remnants of a regurgitated speech, something that was put together by his media team. I listened to the interview of Mr. Femi Adesina within the last 20 or 30 minutes, and it's really worrisome that these are the kind of people the president surrounds himself with, because from what he was saying, it is very clear that the president is unaware, is unclear about the direction that he must take Nigeria within the context of 2021, having gone through what we went through in the year 2020. I must also remind Mr. Femi Adesina that Nigeria is still and currently in its second recession since President Muhammadu Buhari took power in 2015. Which is quite a shame and reminiscent of the kind of leadership we've gotten from this current dispensation. Don't forget that this is the third time Nigeria is going through recession under this same person. It leads one to wonder that where exactly are we headed as a country? You know, when you've listened to a speech that provides no hope, it provides no direction, it sounds as if the man has not even been listening to even the National Assembly that has asked him to rejig his security architecture. You know, it leaves one, I mean, we should actually listen to the message of the PDP, which has encouraged Nigerians to come together and salvage this country, because we only have ourselves to save in this country. If we are looking for leadership, for now, we don't have leadership in Nigeria. And I'm very sure every Nigerian is very certain and clear of this particular fact that leadership is currently absent in Nigeria.
So back to that speech, that
if
message.
Anybody was looking to
Pardon me, you can land on that.
Speech to provide succor and direction.
Mr. Ehelebo.
Well, if anybody was looking to the speech of Mr. President to provide direction and succor, it's very unfortunate that rather than do that, it just was an empty speech, a speech that had no basis, it had no direction, it had no guarantees, no promises, it had no will. We could not see anything in that speech that was a sign of hope for Nigerians. But I think the best hope Nigerians have is that we have a viable opposition. I'll urge Mr. President to go and read all the speeches, all the speeches issued by the spokesperson of the People's Democratic Party, because in therein he will find solutions to the myriad of problems that Nigeria currently faces.
So, still back to that speech, I mean, using that term empty and directionless, what would be a well-loaded speech for you? What would be a speech with direction for you?
Well, first of all, we would have expected the president to look at his security architecture and find out what's missing. You can't have the same service chiefs for the last 5 years and continue. You know, there's a saying that if you continue to repeat the same thing and you expect a different result, that begins to lead to the term of madness. Because as we are in Nigeria today, I can assure you that nobody can conveniently say he will drive his car from Abuja to Kaduna safely, and he will be confident that he will have safety along that road. So, and so goes for every other journey you want to take. If you travel from Abuja to Lokoja today, you are sure that you will have heart palpitations. I'm sure a lot of people have had heart problems having to travel that road because of the current insecurity that pervades the nation. So it's very surprising that one would say that that speech contained any hope for Nigeria. We would have expected the president to provide us with statistics, figures, and actual vision of where he wants to drive. But, I mean, you never that cordon habet, we say in legal parlance, you can't give what you don't have. Because if you look at the composition of his cabinet, look at the composition of the people around him, you can tell what to expect. Look at the person that just spoke earlier, the spokesperson of the president. Look at how he trivialized the issues of Nigerians, how it looks so simple to him that Nigerians do not even have any problems. Well, I'd advise Mr. Femi Adesina to take a walk and go to the several markets around you. If he's in Lagos, he should go to Alade Market or go to Balogun Market and make that kind of statement and see what people will do to him. Because he is unaware that Nigerians are desperate, crying. Nigerians are hungry. Nigerians lack security. Nigerians have turned to providers of their own security. Every neighborhood in that Lagos that he's making that speech from has his own vigilante that they are paying. So we have become local governments of our own. Even in my state, in Edo State today, cannot be provided with security because the governor is almost looking helpless. He doesn't command anything. He doesn't control the security apparatus. If the president was serious about providing security, I'm sure he would have looked at the security architecture and looked for the most effective way to provide security for Nigerians at this point in time. A retired general. It is such a shame that we have come to this place as a country.
Well, speaking of security, the president promised to be more proactive and preemptive. And I was speaking with Mr. Adesina on what that specifically means. You say your party has provided alternatives, has provided ideas. So in that area, briefly, what will be proactive and preemptive for you in this new year?
Well, in the first instance, the president, on the day the president traveled to Kankara, I was on the road. Unfortunately, I saw his convoy and I saw the kind of security the president provided around himself. Unfortunately, the president was in his own home state when 300 people, 300 children or more were said to have been kidnapped by armed bandits. Now, if that is not a telling for failure, I wonder what else is. If a man cannot protect his own home, where else can he protect? If we are going to provide solutions for the president, as seen often now, he has been inviting the former president several times to come, President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, to come and give him the strategy PDP used to perhaps secure the country. We never had it this bad. We never had it this bad. Yes, we had an insurgency which was bettered at a very young time, and we were trying to grasp and understand how to manage it. But before the end of the tenure of President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, we saw that Boko Haram were pushed to the fringes. But since this president has come in, they have assumed an era of importance. They have assumed such a magnificent stand that they have taken over cities in the northwest. They are beginning to demand taxes from people. In his own state in Katsina, we saw the governor going to negotiate with bandits in the forest. Now, how do you call that security? If the president is interested in providing security for people, first of all, look at your security architecture. If the service chiefs are not giving you what you need, you sack them and bring in new people and give them an ultimatum and tell them, I'm giving you 6 months to solve these issues. Make sure that the security provision, the financial provision for catering to this security, these strategies are put in place. There are a lot of people who are in the background, on the fringes, waiting to come in. But no, what do we have? Look at Bishop Kuka's homily on Christmas Day. He alluded to the president's nepotism, that is one of the causes of the problems we have in Nigeria. How do you sit back as probably an assistant commissioner of police who has walked through the ranks, and you see somebody who doesn't deserve a promotion, but because he's probably from the president's village or from his region, he's given a position he ought not to have been given? What do you expect will happen? There are rules to these things. There are ways that you can positively mobilize people to begin to take security as their own personal forte. But when these people see that even the person that is leading them has no care, does not make provisions, has nothing to do, even the president's wife, where is she today? We heard she has taken off. That is rumor mill today. Nobody has come out to deny this fact that because of insecurity, she can no longer stay in the country. Now, if a man cannot protect his house, again, I say, how does he intend to protect other people? I will ask Mr. President. Mr. President should sit back and not sit in his armchair and allow people to becloud him with different stories that he is doing so well. He is not doing well. The people of Katsina are consistent. For 5 hours I heard yesterday, they blocked the road, are consistently protesting of the insecurity they have. Go to Niger State, Boko Haram is resurging there. Borno State, the governor of Borno State, Governor Zulum, has been attacked 4 times. Governor Shatima, when the PDP held sway, was never attacked by Boko Haram. But 4 times we have seen the governor of Borno State attacked by these insurgents. Every day he's crying, maybe because he has a certain relationship with the president, doesn't want to speak the truth to him. But go and look at the senators from Borno State. Look at what they are saying every day on the floor of the Senate. People are afraid to speak up because once you speak up, the president will intimidate you. But you know, PDP cannot be machinated, PDP cannot be put down. We will speak the truth to the president. As I'm speaking here now, I'm not afraid to tell him that he has failed in terms of security. And perhaps I was expecting that he would have even a better thing for Nigeria, he would have resigned on the 1st of January. But since that did not come, we will not force him out of power. We will encourage him that please, because of Nigerians, let us find a way to make this country safe for everyone. Because that's the first thing. The economy you are going to talk about, maybe I know you are going to go there, it starts from security. If someone does not, look at, if you are talking about people going back to agriculture, do you know how many farmers were beheaded in the period of December 1st to 31st of December 2020? 43 farmers, rice farmers, people that produce our rice, were beheaded. And a spokesman of the president said they did not get permits before they went to the farms. Does that not tell you that we are not thinking in this country? We need to provide security first for our farmers before we start encouraging them to go to the farm. Because if I go to my farm and I am not safe, I will not go to the farm.
Let me also get your thoughts on this, Mr. Halebo.
The inputs are not even there for them to go. If you put the inputs, they are being...
Right, pardon me. Let me also get your thoughts on this because it's tied together.
Corruption is at...
Pardon me. So we talked about consequences earlier on, and I got Mr. Adesina's response regarding what will be the consequences, because the president's speech sort of, gave us a picture of what to expect. And the question will be, what would you think the consequences should be if the government does not meet up to these expectations that they have set?
You see, one thing I spoke about during the NSAS protest was that it was a glimpse into the future of Nigeria. Even the so-called priest that supports the president gave him a prediction that Nigerian youths will cause an uprising in 2021 if the president does not pay attention to them. We saw a glimpse of this in the NSAS protest. It is very important that we begin to take the aspirations of young people. You know, yesterday or so, on the social media, a young man, Muyiwa, posted that he had passed his IELTS after 5 attempts and that he was leaving this country for good. The brain drain in Nigeria today is at an alarming rate. The president needs to sit down and understand that the consequences of not providing a viable economy, a security-conscious Nigeria, a security fortified country for people to be able to operate and be able to provide for their families is one that spells doom and anarchy. Nigeria is at the precipice as we speak. Nowhere is safe or secure in Nigeria today. I doubt that there's any state. Imagine an auxiliary bishop of the Catholic Church in Owerri Diocese was kidnapped and recently released just 2 days ago. How do we explain this? When did we get to this point? Nobody, soldiers are even being kidnapped on the Kaduna-Abuja Expressway. Soldiers of the Nigerian army are being kidnapped. So who is safe? Who is safe in this country? The consequences of this is that you will not have investments. Investors are afraid to come into the country because they are not sure that when they come in, they will have security, or that that the government itself, even by its own actions, will give them equity and justice, that if court judgments are given, the government will obey those court judgments. Now, a very important point that I must make is that there must be, like you said, consequences for actions. I want to ask a question. A number of children were kidnapped in Katsina. These children were freed. Till today, have we seen anybody arrested for this crime? It was a crime. But we are hearing that these people were given money to release those children, and they are today rich men wherever they are. So we are yet to see a country that gives consequences for actions. So if people commit crimes, as these people are, and they are nothing but bandits, They are not fostering any religious. Boko Haram has no religious indoctrination, because I know they kill both Christians and Muslims. So we must not take them or pamper them that they are from a certain region or that they are following a religious doctrine. No, they are not. They are certainly criminals. And we must begin to see, how many times have we seen a high-level Boko Haram suspect tried and convicted in a court of law today? I just say that we do not even have anyone that we can point to and say this has happened. People are not being indicted. It took the UAE arresting top officials that were not even mentioned, their names were not mentioned, of this government, and prosecuting them in the UAE for illicit financial flows. Have we seen that happen in Nigeria? Instead, young children are accountable.
Mr. Ahelebo,
so let us even
quite a number of issues
into the nitty-gritty of what we need to do. We must begin to see consequences for actions that people take. So if kidnappers kidnap people, or terrorists or bandits are arrested, they are I have heard tales that these people will...
Mr. Ahelebo, just so we can get your response to some other issues. Pardon me, just so we can get your response to some other issues, because there are quite a number of them. As we wind down on this, the president also spoke on partnerships, and he said that your voices have been heard, and we will continue to listen to you and all the key stakeholders who are committed to the unity of Nigeria to ensure that every region of this nation is safe for all. In some sense, the president is talking about partnership. So as we wind down on this conversation briefly, to what extent is your party willing to partner with the president, with the government, in solving this challenge of insecurity and others?
Kayode, you know, I referred you back to all the speeches Mr. Kola Ologbede, the National Publicity Secretary of the PDP, has, and all the statements, press statements he has released. Those statements are words on marble. If the president would subsume his pride, he has asked President Jonathan to the Villa several times, he might as well take time to go through those press statements, because in each one of them, there is an advisory given to him on what to do. Sometimes I even feel upset that why is the PDP giving this president expo on what he ought to have advisors that should tell him? Maybe these advisors or the people he surrounds himself with do not tell him the truth. But he may want to choose to go back to those speeches, look at the content of those speeches, and see where he can take direction from them. Because otherwise, he's only just playing to the gallery. He's an armchair president as far as we are concerned, because we don't see any results of any actions. In fact, the speech he gave today, we know that it will not by tomorrow. That's the end of that.
Well, Mr. Ahelebo, you know what some political scientists will say? They will say that the opposition is meant to be some sort of alternative government for the people. But would like to thank you so much, Mr. Anthony Ahelebo, who is the head of New Media, People's Democratic Party. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on the program. And we look forward to having more robust conversations with you in the future.
No problem, anytime.
So, I need to show you something. In fact, I need you to watch something that the president talked about also during his New Year message. This concerns COVID-19. So take a listen, and we'll switch gears to another conversation.
Because the year 2020 was one of the most trying years since our existence as a nation. This can also be said about all other nations around the world due to the challenges posed on our collective humanity by the novel COVID-19 pandemic. Keeping our country on a forward march is a duty which we all have and share. In this regard, keeping our country safe from a resurgent cycle of COVID-19 as this administration finalizes its plans to procure and efficiently and effectively distribute the COVID-19 vaccines, I urge you all fellow citizens to observe strict COVID-19 prevention protocols.
So that's the plan, as it were, for this year 2021 regarding the COVID-19 virus. There are talks about a vaccine, but then there are also talks about whether or not we should see a lockdown in the coming days. In fact, there are a lot of people who vehemently oppose some sort of lockdown, because remember that conversation, that debate about life and livelihood? Well, it's back again, and for a lot of people, they don't see that, or they don't look forward to that happening. So We'll be looking at some of these issues in a moment. It talks about procuring vaccines, distribution of vaccines, or possible lockdown, this second wave especially, and the fact that we've seen our cases rising gradually. A lot to consider, really, because 2021, yes, it will be a great year, but there's still some uncertainty. So this will form a major part of our conversation when we return from this break. So please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. Now, let me show you something in the president's 2020 New Year letter to Nigerians. Now, this was way before Nigeria recorded its first case in February. And even in China, there were still controversies on the nature of the unknown virus at that time. So here's what the president said then in that letter. He says, I have met international partners such as Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Well, that's not what you have on the screen. This is his 2021 New Year message. But I'm talking about the 2020 New Year message. And don't forget, he spoke about Gavi, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who support our social welfare programs. By the way, it is through the Gavi arrangements that over 40 million Nigerians are expected to be vaccinated. And the alliance has also helped in getting millions of Nigerians immunized against other diseases, while the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has committed over $1.7 billion into development of vaccines, which we're seeing now. You will think the president knew this partnership will be needed in the days to come. Well, Nigeria has since come a long way after that in the fight against COVID-19. And tonight, we speak with Dr. Sani Aliyu, the National Coordinator, Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Good evening, and thank you for joining us, Dr. Aliyu. Now, I mean, like I said, we have come a long way. We're in our second wave. It's not something to cheer about, but clearly this is a very present challenge with us. We've seen cases over 1,000 in the past days. So please tell us, what is the projection for 2021 regarding COVID-19?
Well, what I can say certainly, as you said, is that we are in the second wave. In terms of a projection, it really depends on how we continue to behave as a community, as a country, in terms of complying with our protocols. What we are seeing now is a huge increase in the number of cases. I'm sure most people who have been following the numbers would realize that the numbers we have now far exceeds what we had back in June, July this year. In week 52, which was the week that we've just finished, we've seen a tripling in the weekly number of cases compared to week 49 to 3 weeks ago. At the moment, we are running at close to 6,000 new cases per week, which is really huge. Our hospitals are already starting to get overloaded, and we are already starting to feel the pressure within the health system. So when you talk about the projection really depends on whether people will start taking this very seriously and start following those non-pharmaceutical interventions that we've been talking about for the last 1 year. We've been able to demonstrate that it is possible to flatten the curve, but we need the cooperation of everybody. We need the cooperation of the general public. We need the cooperation of the state governments. And in this way, I'm actually very pleased that some of the state governments have taken decisive action to enforce some of the rules. It should be socially unacceptable nowadays for people to go out without a face mask. We should be assuming that whoever we meet outside our immediate household could potentially be infected with COVID-19 and take those precautions that are necessary. 2021 should be a better year than 2020, but it can only be a better year if we continue to comply with those protocols while government tries to get the vaccine across to our citizens to make sure that we are protected.
Well, like you said, the role of governors will be vital in achieving this. And the governor of Kogi State believes that we don't need, in his words, the brouhaha about COVID-19 and vaccines now. In fact, he thinks that we don't need to participate in the marketing of vaccine or COVID-19. That was his message, not to Nigerians, but to the PTF in particular. So hearing this and hearing the response that Nigerians have given, how do you respond to that?
Well, I'm not going to join words with my good friend, the governor of Kogi, or be specific in terms of any particular state government. We are talking holistically here. All I can say is 33 people 33 people died of COVID in the last 1 week. Are we saying that those people died for nothing? COVID exists. Anybody who says COVID-19 does not exist is probably living in a completely different world. We've been having, in the last 1 week, as I said, we've had a tripling of cases. You can see what's happening in the US, you can see what's happening in the UK, etc. And when it comes to vaccines, this is not the first time we're using vaccines. We've had childhood vaccines being introduced for years. And there's always been that debate in terms of safety and efficacy, the balance between harm and good. And the countries, the international community, they are not stupid enough to introduce something that will harm their people. These vaccines have been tried, they have been trialed, they have gone through phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 trials. If the vaccine was available today in this country, I will have it, and my family will have it. And I'm very sure the vast majority of Nigerians will accept a vaccine, because the vaccine, together with the non-pharmaceutical interventions, is the only way we can get on top of this epidemic. And by the way, Nigeria cannot afford to be a pariah nation. I can tell you, Kayode, that in the coming months, as more and more people in the world, as millions start taking up this vaccine, it will be very clear whether or not there's going to be an issue with safety. And I am very certain that these vaccines will continue to be safe and effective based on the robustness of the clinical trials that have been undertaken. And if you don't have the vaccine, you're going to be stuck, because I am very certain that countries internationally in the next 6 months to a year will start insisting on a certificate before you get into their country. So you'll not be able to go for Hajj or Umrah or the Christian pilgrimage to Israel or on your holiday to Dubai or for business to China and South Africa if you do not have the vaccine. Government will not press you down and inject you with the vaccine. No, it's going to be voluntary, but it will be free, and it will be initially for a specific group of people. So, for instance, we're going to prioritize healthcare workers, we're going to prioritize the elderly, those above the age of 60, and those with comorbidities such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, etc., because these are the people that are most likely to have severe COVID infection.
Well, Dr. Aliyu, it's only...
We look forward to having the vaccine in the coming 4 weeks, hopefully arriving, the first batch arriving by the end of January. And we will vaccinate. And those people who don't want to vaccinate, of course, we will try as much as we can to convince them. We will make use of our risk communication strategies, because we've had previous experience, remember, with polio. There wasn't... A lot of things were said about the polio vaccine, but at the end of the day, what happened? We finally were able to get on top of things, and we were able to convince people, and I hope we'll be able to convince our communities, our religious leaders, traditional rulers, to come and line up behind us and make sure that everybody who needs to have the vaccine gets the vaccine.
So will there be
access? It will be free,
right,
and it will be important that we use it in order to get on top of this epidemic. The rest of the world is doing so, and we need to do the same as well.
Just to be clear, Dr. Aliyu, I mean, you talked about some people getting stuck if they don't get the vaccine because they won't be able to travel abroad, but you know that's for a privileged few, if I can use that expression. So for the ones that don't have plans to travel really, I mean, they're here in Nigeria and they plan to stay in Nigeria for the foreseeable future, will there be any consequence for them not taking the vaccine? Will there be any of such?
Well, in public health terms, what you try to do when it comes to public health interventions is you don't make it compulsory unless you really have to. But you try as much as you can to create public awareness, to make it very clear to the public that it's actually in their best interest to do so, and also to demonstrate how safe it is. By the time the vaccine comes to Nigeria, already more than 1 million have had the vaccine in Israel. By the time it comes to Nigeria, end of January or early February, hopefully, we would have had tens of millions of people across the world who would have had this vaccine. And it will be very clear that it's safe. It will be also very clear that it's effective. And as you said, okay, a small number of Nigerians travel out of the country, but it's the ripple effect of those Nigerians traveling out, because that's where the economy is driven. In the same way that you would have issues with people traveling out of the country, so also those people that bring business to us into the country, nobody would want to be traveling to a country endemic for COVID-19. No. So whatever happens, even our neighbors, for instance, if they get on top of the epidemic, and meanwhile we have a raging epidemic ongoing in Nigeria simply because we are not keen to take the COVID vaccine, and we become a pariah nation, we will be a risk to the entire sub-region in terms of the control of COVID. So,
okay, Dr. Aliyu, because of our time, I need to put in some questions.
It will not be compulsory.
Right. Pardon me, because of our time.
It will not be compulsory to have the vaccine.
Okay. That's noted. So quickly, let me just get your responses to this. Which of the vaccines are we getting? Because there's Pfizer, BioNTech, there's Moderna, Oxford, AstraZeneca, there's Sputnik 5, there's China's Sinopharm, and the rest. So which of the vaccines are we getting in Nigeria?
So we're not going to put all our eggs in one basket. And that discussion is still ongoing. But as you said at the beginning of the program, we are working very closely with Gavi. The vaccine we would use will be vaccines that have been validated, they have undergone the full clinical trials required, and we know that are safe. And there will be vaccines that are acceptable also to the international community, including Gavi.
So
that's what I can say at this point in time. I don't think people should worry too much about the logistics side of it. The Primary Healthcare Development Agency is already working very closely to make sure those vaccines that require ultra-cold chain arrangements, that arrangement is put in place. And from the PTF side, we've already asked the Primary Healthcare Agency and the Federal Ministry of Health to make sure that they do some sort of early exercise to make sure that everything is in place. But even with the cold chain, for instance, they have to be thawed. You cannot inject a frozen vaccine at -70 into a human. So there will be some allowance in terms of the number of days that you can keep the vaccine at a normal refrigeration temperature before you administer. But people don't need to worry too much about those logistics. I'm sure it will be done, and it will be done properly.
Well, something a lot of people are worried about, Dr. Aliyu.
We will provide all the information required.
Right. Something a lot of people are worried about as we, wind down on this is the talk about lockdown. So in 2021, if you can project, is there a possibility of a lockdown, or what will make us go into a lockdown if that's a possibility? Briefly, please.
I would turn the question around. Do you want a lockdown? And I think the vast majority would say no. Well, if you don't want a lockdown, the only way we can avoid a lockdown is to make sure that we use our face mask, we avoid mass gatherings, we avoid mixing with people that have respiratory tract infections, we sanitize our hands, we follow those non-pharmaceutical interventions. The very vaccine that we currently have at the moment are those non-pharmaceutical interventions. If the numbers continue to go up, all options are on the table. But we need to make sure there are countries in the world that have been able to control this pandemic simply by following these non-pharmaceutical interventions. They may be inconvenient, but they will not be as difficult as a lockdown. We don't want to have a lockdown because of the impact it will have on our economy. But no government will sit down and allow their citizens to become infected with a preventable disease and die from it. We're
Dr. Aliyu, clearly 2021
of the second wave on our health system. At the moment, people
clearly
are starting
2021,
to die, and we really need to take this seriously.
Right. Clearly, the year will be a challenging one, but we wish you the very best. And we'd like to thank you so much, Dr. Sani Aliyu, the National Coordinator of PTF on COVID-19, for shedding some light on some of these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
So, that's our show for tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Kayode Okikelu. Enjoy the rest of your evening.